The Be Quiet Pure Bass 500 is the elegant and minimalistic variant of the highly popular Pure Bass 500 DX that I reviewed just a few months ago. This case is available in 3 color variants and has a retail price of around $85 or euros, a price that makes it quite appealing, especially in today's market where many cases are overpriced just because they have RGB and tempered glass. The design of this case is pretty good, with a linear brushed texture on the front panel but without any of the fingerprints that usually follow such a brushed texture. This is mainly thanks to the fact that the front panel is actually made out of plastic and not metal. In addition, the front panel has rounded corners which add a bit more depth to the overall look of the case and help it a bit differentiate itself from the market. Removing the front panel is made very easy because it is held attached to the chassis of the case by just some plastic clips, so all you need to do is pull it from its underside and it will pop off. And this reveals why this case is better than the average box with RGB LEDs, because the sides of this front panel are pretty big to allow for the air to be drawn in by the fans, but also these spaces feature their own dust filters. These small filters are detachable and thus you can clean them fairly easily when it's time for maintenance. In addition, while here is the main intake area of the case and has plenty of ventilation, the underside of the front panel is covered by soft foam that will dampen the noise of the system somewhat. The I/O panel is located at the front of the case, more precisely on the top of the front panel, and here we have 2 USB 3.0 ports, 1 audio jack and 1 microphone jack, and of course the power button which has an integrated LED. There is no reset button present or a USB Type-C port. However, the great thing about this I/O panel is the fact that it is not actually attached to the front panel. Yes, someone had the smart idea of attaching the I/O panel directly to the chassis of the case and not the removable front panel. Thus, you can remove it and access the dust filters or the front intake fans without disturbing the cables and the I/O panel itself. The main side panel is made out of tempered glass and has a slight tint. Unfortunately, while it does look great, it is attached to the case by just 4 thumb screws, which is an outdated mechanism. I would have loved to see some sort of swivel mechanism integrated here, as many people find it hard to align the holes with the rubber grommets of the chassis. It is not a deal breaker, but it is an inconvenience, especially for beginners and those that are afraid of breaking the glass itself. The opposite side panel is made from regular metal and has a classic notch system to be attached to the case itself. In addition, this panel has a foam pad applied to its underside to reduce the overall noise generated by the system. At the back, this panel is secured with the help of 2 captive thumb screws. At the back of the case, there isn't much to talk about except about the way the power supply is installed, but more on that feature later on into the video. In addition, the expansion slot covers are attached with thumb screws and a separate metallic plate that covers the said thumb screws from the side. On the underside of the case, there is a massive dust filter that covers the entire length and width of the case. This filter is removable from the front of the case and sits on rails. The feet of the case are pretty tall and quite sturdy. They also have rubber pads to increase the stability and grip of the case, while also preventing any scratches from occurring. The interior of the Pure Bass 500 is the same as the one in the Pure Bass 500 DX, and this means that it is very good. The front side of the case has a pre-installed Be Quiet 140mm fan, which is part of the Pure Wings 2 series. And here you have an option of either having dual 140mm fans installed or 3 120mm fans installed. The other pre-installed fan is located at the back of the case and it is the same 140mm fan which is part of the Pure Wings 2. The top side of the case can accommodate either 2 120mm fans or 2 140mm fans. And in terms of radiator support, here you can install either a single 120mm radiator or a single 240mm radiator. One good thing about the top of this case is that the fan mounting spaces are placed away from the motherboard. Thus the fan or the radiator will not be close to the motherboard heatsinks or the RAM modules. The top of the case can be covered by 2 included panels. The one that is pre-installed on the case is meant to block most of the noise from the system, but it also severely restricts the airflow. However, The optional top panel has a mesh dust filter which should increase the overall airflow of the case and thus the cooling performance. If you have more than one fan installed on the top of the case, I will highly recommend to install the mesh filter at the top or remove the filters completely, as the cooling benefits will always be better than a lower noise output. The entire lower part of the case is covered by a metallic shroud which unfortunately cannot be removed. However, there are plenty of cutouts into the top part of the shroud to allow for the air to move freely between the lower part of the case and the upper part. Also, the cutouts are in the shape of a really nice pattern, so that's a really nice touch. And the good things keep on coming, as on the lower side of the motherboard tray, there are 3 big cutouts specifically placed there to allow for easy passage of the I/O cables of the motherboard, a thing which many times gets neglected. The cable cutouts are covered by a metallic plate that sports the Be Quiet logo. This is a simple method of covering the cables and completely removing the requirement for rubber grommets on the holes for the wire management. Behind the motherboard tray, there are plenty of tie-down points for securing the cables, and that will be a great help. In addition, the space between the motherboard tray and the side panel is approximately 24 mm, which is plenty for most cables as long as you do not try to overlap thick cables. The storage options are plentiful, if you know what I mean, with a metallic bracket placed over the back of the motherboard tray, which can accommodate up to 2 SSDs and is held in place with just thumb screws, so it is very easy to work with. The other storage options are placed on the front plate that is also covering the cable cutouts. Here you can install a total of 2 SSDs. For even more storage, you get a dedicated cage on the lower level of the case, right at the front. Here you can install either 2 SSDs or 2 hard drives, which is quite nice. In addition, this storage cage can be removed to increase the clearance for radiators at the front of the case. Installing the power supply is done at the back of the case and only here. There is a bracket which must be installed at the back of the power supply, and then you insert the power supply into the case. This system is present most likely because the power supply cover is not removable and the space left between the shroud and the case is not big enough to slide the power supply from the side. It is a good solution to a problem that shouldn't really exist in the first place, but here we are. With a complete system installed, we get to see the potential that the PureBase 500 offers, not only for water cooling, but for air cooling as well. There is ample space available for the graphics card, approximately 360 mm, so anything you throw at this case, it will take. There is also a good amount of space for the CPU power cable at the top of the case. Also, the motherboard and thus the whole system are not that close to the top of the case and the fan slots, which is always good to see. In terms of the temperatures, this is a good case for airflow, and the intake is also filtered, so the dust should be kept to a minimum. The overall temperatures are good for my testing system, although there is around a 5-degree difference in the CPU temperature with the mesh top panel installed as opposed to the solid one. The Be Quiet PureBase 500 is a really good case, and a good looking case as well. The build quality is very good and the features included are what we usually see on the upper segment of the market. There is plenty of filtering present, so the dust inside your system should be kept at a minimum. And there are also plenty of options for water cooling and air cooling, thanks to the generous fan mounts at the top and front of the case. The inconvenience of this case are the lack of a USB Type-C port, which has been increasing in popularity, and also the complete lack of a fan hub, which should be the default in modern cases. However, if you can live with these small issues and you want a compact mid-tower case that will offer plenty of cooling options and a good build quality, then the Be Quiet PureBase 500 should be a worthy consideration when you are looking for a case. If you like this review, then you can perhaps consider subscribing for more, and also if you want to support the channel in a direct way, then in the description below you can find both the Patreon and subscriber star pages of this channel.